Trump on trial, and Iran bombs Jerusalem, and Dr. Phil gets even woker. All that and a whole lot more. We're brought to you by the Electronic Payments Coalition. I'm Larry O'Connor. Call me Larry. Today is the first day of jury selection for the Trump trial. This has to do with Stormy Daniels and payments made before the 2016 campaign. That's right. This story is 8 years old, but somehow they've just figured out how to bring the criminal action right in the middle of a presidential election on 2024. I'm sure that's just a coincidence of timing. I'm sure if Trump weren't running for president or if Biden weren't running for re-election and the Democrats actually had something good to run on, I'm sure this would still be happening. Aren't you? Donald Trump's attorneys asked for a change of venue for a different jury pool, not down to Mississippi or Alabama or anything. No, to Staten Island. They just wanted to take the ferry from Manhattan to Staten Island to maybe have a little bit better of a jury pool amongst the New Yorkers, but even that was denied. No, it's a Manhattan jury pool. The borough, I believe, voted 78% against Donald Trump in the last election. This is totally fair. Fantastic situation in New York. Also, as he was arriving at the courthouse, the cable news stations treated it like the OJ Bronco chase with a helicopter overhead showing the motorcade. What are we doing here? Seriously, is this really news? I guess it is. If they tell us it's news, it's news. Donald Trump arriving at the courtroom earlier today, defiant as I hope he is.
Walking into the courtroom.
Is that common,
here.
Andy?
Yeah.
Huh. Here's President Trump as he walks in. Let's just see if we get a comment.
Mr. Trump, you heard about jail time. Are you going to lose voters if there's conviction?
This is an assault on America. Nothing like this has ever happened before. There's never been anything like it. Every legal scholar says this case is nonsense. It should never have been brought. It doesn't deserve anything like this. There is no case, and they've said it. People that don't necessarily follow or like Donald Trump said this is an outrage that this case was brought. This is political persecution. This is a persecution like never before. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. And again, it's a case that should have never been brought. It's an assault on America. And that's why I'm very proud to be here. This is an assault on our country. And it's a country that's failing. It's a country that's run by an incompetent man who's very much involved in this case. This is really an attack on a political opponent. That's all it is. So I'm very honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Great statement from President Trump, and he's right. By the way, that sound you hear, Donald Trump's opinion polls going up another 2 or 3 points, because every time this happens, that's exactly what occurs. Part of the problem here, by the way, is in the chyron there from Fox News. Seriously, Fox News? Et tu, Fox News? Trump speaks outside of hush money trial. You know, they keep calling it a hush money case. They do that on purpose. Who pays hush money? Well, somebody who's guilty pays hush money. Who pays hush money? Mobsters pay hush money. That's a mafia thing, right? Who pays hush money? Criminals pay hush money. There's no hush money here. Donald Trump entered into a non-disclosure agreement with the actress known as Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels claimed that she was going to go to the press and tell a story about Donald Trump. Donald Trump, without admitting that the story was true or not, just said, all right, listen, if I just pay you money, will you go away? It happens a lot. She agreed to the non-disclosure agreement, and then, of course, she violated her non-disclosure agreement. The only reason this has reached to the level of criminality is because the district attorney in Manhattan ran for office saying, elect me and I'll get Donald Trump. And, you know, that right there is a little alarming and disconcerting. I understand district attorneys saying, you know, vote for me and I'm going to get tough on violent crime. Vote for me and I'm going to get tough on the mob or the mafia, or vote for me and I'm going to go after panhandlers and homeless, you know, all the problems that New York legitimately actually has that they could use a district attorney for. But when a district attorney runs targeting a single individual who doesn't even live in New York, That sort of seems kind of authoritarian, don't you think? Sort of seems like a banana republic, but that's what happened. But even Alvin Bragg wasn't going to bring this case originally, but then he was convinced to do so, partly by members of the Biden Merrick Garland Justice Department. In fact, one key player, the person who will be trying the case, had worked in the Justice Department. He took a leave of absence so he could go join Alvin Bragg's prosecution team. Did you know that? It's not reported very much, is it? Because, you know, on cable news, they're too busy writing a chyron saying hush money. By the way, guys over at Fox News, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you have some experience with non-disclosure agreements. I'm pretty sure that there are former employees and probably current employees who entered into non-disclosure agreements over there at Fox News. Am I wrong about that? I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. So are you engaging in hush money? So stupid. That said, there's some great stuff that goes on at Fox News, of course, including this guy, the great one, Mark Levin. Today's a really good day to remember what he said 1 year ago when this indictment came down in the first place, because everything Mark Levin said a year ago about this trial rings true today. I mean, that's why he's the great one.
And the Republicans better wake the hell up. We need to circle the wagons. We need to understand what we're up against. This is much more fundamental than some phony rogue case by a phony rogue prosecutor who was installed by George Soros and the Democrats. This is much bigger than that. So to answer your question, I don't give a damn about the processing that goes on in Manhattan and all the rest of it. You know, people quote a lot and they don't know who they're quoting, and that would be Beria. Beria was one of the great genocidal maniacs of all time. He worked for Stalin. In the end, he was executed himself. And it is Leverity of Beria, who was a massive, ruthless killer. And he was the one who said, show me the individual and I will show you the crime. And this man was responsible for horrendous acts. This country has now become a tyranny in many respects. And the American people feel it. The American people know it. They see what's taking place. The American media had become the Pravda media because it's loaded with Democrats in the American media. And look, even Fox, Conservative Talk Radio, OAN, Newsmax, under constant attack, under constant pressure by sleazy lawyers, by sleazy phony journalists, because they don't like the competition.
Right. And they're losing.
Of ideas,
and they're
period.
losing.
They
And
don't
by
want
the
the
way,
competition from the Republican Party and conservatives. That is what's going on.
Mark, right now, the Fox News poll on Tuesday has Trump up by 30 points on Ron DeSantis, and this will probably only foster it. Let me ask you something. You interviewed the president yesterday, I understand, before the indictment came down. How would you describe his demeanor?
And I went back afterwards because I was invited to dinner. This is a remarkable man. I mean, would you be able to eat after you were charged like this with a phony prosecutor? He was very congenial. He was very strong. He was there with the former First Lady, and his son was there, Don Jr., and they couldn't have been. This is a real family. This is a very close family. If you saw the president and Melania together, they are tight as can be. They are strong as can be. He's a very decent man. He cares so deeply about the country. You walk around Mar-a-Lago or you look outside and you think to yourself, this man doesn't need any of this. All he has to do is say, I'm not running anymore. I give up. He won't give up. He's not going to back down to this stuff. And so his supporters and the rest of the American people need to understand that this is a unique man at a unique time in our history, that this country is in very, very grave danger when the law is being used this way against political opponents, a Republican Party, people who have different views at school board meetings and who are opposed to abortion. And it's even worse than that. The efforts by the Biden administration to censor free speech and the Democrat Party, the disinformation board that they want to create, the commingling of government with the social media platforms. Look. I have been studying totalitarianism and tyranny. I have been studying fascism and communism. This is it, guys. This is it. I know people think it can't be. It's the United States of America. What makes us different is our Constitution. What makes us different are the first 10 amendments, is the Bill of Rights within the Constitution. What makes us different is our customs and our traditions and our systems. And when you have one party that has given up all of that, that violates all the boundaries, that is in power for a temporary period of time and wants to make its power permanent, and they've done this in places like California and New York and Illinois and New Jersey, and they take those models and they try and superimpose it on the entire United States.
But they all fail.
People are fleeing these blue states.
Right,
That's
they
why
all fail.
Florida's population and Tennessee's population.
He's 100% right there. This is exactly what does happen in authoritarian regimes. We've seen it for the last 130 years, really, since the Bolsheviks. And by the way, Mao did them one better. They did the same thing. When Mao rolled in, he seized the courts, he seized the military, he seized the media, he seized everything. Total communist, authoritarian, totalitarian regime where no one has rights anymore. And then during the Cultural Revolution in the early 60s, he turned children on their own parents to call them out. That's literally what we're seeing the left do right now in our public schools, turning children against their own parents based on their political ideas. If your parents support Trump, they're actually racist. You should challenge them on their racism. This is right out of their rule book. And good for Mark Levin to point it out. Again, I want to point out that was a year ago. And he saw exactly where we were. And I just want to say what he mentioned about Donald Trump having, I do like the little bit of a flex there that he had dinner with Trump at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, because he's Mark freaking Levin. You bet your ass he did. Mark Levin points out that Trump doesn't need this. He doesn't. He's got it very, honestly, if you were Donald Trump and you were married to Melania and you were living at Mar-a-Lago and you were already serving a term and you're just done, what would compel you to jump into this even further? But obviously, he believes in this country. He believes that he is the last man standing right now between the next step of totalitarianism. He believes that. And I know a lot of people don't like Trump. And there's a lot of people out there who have said in polls, and this is why this is happening, by the way, that they support Trump, they like Trump, right up until the point if he gets convicted of a felony. Then, I don't know. Let me tell you something. First of all, I don't believe those polls because it's hypothetical. Whenever you ask somebody, how will you vote or will you support this person if A or B happens, it's just complete and total BS, all right? Don't poll on an hypothetical. But the left is counting on that. Democrats are counting on that. They can't count on the economy. They can't count on unemployment. They can't count on national security. They can't count on peace in the world. They can't count on border security. They can't count on peaceful, crime-free streets in our major American cities. They can't count on your kids having a great education. They can't count on great goods and services being provided by our private sector or our public sector. They can't count on any of that. The only thing they can count on is fear-mongering and intimidating people away from voting for the other guy. This is going to be the first re-election campaign you've ever seen where it's not going to be a referendum on the current president. Joe Biden's not going to say, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Because he can't. He knows the answer. He's going to say, I promise you, you're better off than you were 8 years ago or something. And so what they're trying to do is slime Trump in any way possible. They want to make you feel ashamed that you're supporting a man who has been convicted of a felony. Well, when is a felony conviction not a felony conviction? When it's complete and total horseshit. That's when. And everybody sees it. And everybody knows it. So it's not going to work. It's not going to work. But that's all they have. And yet the charade will continue, the theater will continue, and we'll all sit and we'll watch the courtroom drama play out on our cable news because none of us have the energy to go outside and run a few miles instead. And at the end of the day, we'll be right back where we were at the beginning of this trial, except Donald Trump will be even more of a martyr and more of a demonstration of what will happen to us if we get in the way of the machine that is the American deep state and the cultural, political, Marxist left. And for people out there who may be an individual say, I support Trump and I know we can't keep going with Biden, but if he gets convicted of a felony, I don't know, that might be it for me. Guys, as our great columnist at Town Hall, my friend Kurt Schlichter, wrote in a great column on Friday, I think it was, you're not voting for your best friend. You're not voting for your favorite human being on the planet. You're not voting for somebody to babysit your children. That ship has sailed. I would love to vote for the reincarnation of George Washington and Ronald Reagan melded into one. That ain't happening right now. Live in the real world. You're voting to end the disaster that's in the White House right now, and you're voting to bring back the man who actually had this country moving in the right direction for the first time in many, many years. Did you know that millions and millions of Americans earn and use credit card rewards on a regular basis? They love them. Well, corporate megastores want to take those rewards away now. These are rewards that we use for groceries, for school supplies. They give us cash back so we can save on gas and grow our small businesses. But travel miles, I use my travel miles all the time. I use them, as you do, to take dream vacations, to be able to fly loved ones in to visit you or to go and visit your loved ones and make memories. Well, the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill is going to eliminate all of those credit card rewards. No more travel miles, no more cash back. Lawmakers are helping corporate megastores line their pockets, and we, American families, we're going to pay for it. Tell your senator to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. Visit handsoffmyrewards.com. That's handsoffmyrewards.com and take action today. Now, over the weekend, we saw Iran with an unprecedented military attack against our ally, our friend, our only real ally, and the only real functioning democracy in the Middle East, the state of Israel. We saw drones flying overhead in Jerusalem with missiles aimed at innocent Israeli families, aimed at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but they were intercepted mostly by Israel's Iron Dome. By the way, an Iron Dome technology that when it was in its nascent gestation, known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, Joe Biden voted against it because Joe Biden's been against any good idea for the last 50 years. The Iron Dome protected the people of Israel by intercepting the drones and the missiles, including the Al-Aqsa Mosque at the Temple Mount, one of the holiest locations in Islam. It took Israel to protect an Islamic holy site from Iran. Think about that for a minute. And there's a lot of noise going back and forth about the Biden administration's complacency and complicitness in this attack, advanced knowledge of the attack, a tacit approval to Iran for the attack. We'll get into those details in just a moment. There's an outrageous demand from the people of the world to make Israel stand down and not retaliate, that they must show restraint, and no one's been able to figure out or tell me why exactly they must show restraint. Piers Morgan begging Israel to show restraint. A good thing Winston Churchill didn't show restraint when London was being bombed. I don't know why there's a double standard for Israel, how they're asked and demanded to behave unlike any other country on the planet when they get attacked by a military aggressor like Iran. You know, a country that's promised to wipe them off the map. But one other angle of this story that needs to be focused on is the people of Iran. The great Persian people who have been suffering for 40 years under the religious authoritarian regime of the mullahs. And there are some voices that are now starting to emerge, asking people to look beyond that government and help them with their attempts to overthrow the people who have been keeping them in every sort of bondage for the last 4 decades. One Iranian Western influencer on social media has gone viral with this message to the world. Take a look.
Hi, Iranian woman here. It's become very apparent that you haven't been listening to anything that we've had to say for the past 2 years. But I was wondering if you could just lend me a few minutes of your time in this ungodly hour to hear us now. We've had to watch over the past 24 hours people clambering onto the internet to exclaim that Iran has the right to defend itself. In what capacity have you distorted the story to make the Islamic Republic the victim? That's I think what we're most curious about. When we were screaming for the past 2 years that they were lynching us, where were you? When we were screaming that they were killing Iranian women for not wearing a hijab, where were you? When they were lynching Iranian men from cranes for protesting, where were you? When we were explaining that this is a terrorist occupying force, where were you? But all of a sudden, everyone's graduated from Instagram School of Law to say that this is a violation of international law and Iran has the right to defend itself. First of all, you're not talking about Iran, you're talking about the Islamic Republic. What the Islamic Republic does is not a reflection of the Iranian people. We've been clear about what we want, which is peace. Second of all, you may have discovered the Middle East yesterday, but the Middle East didn't start existing yesterday. If you want to talk about an act of war, just a few days ago, a federal court determined that the attacks on Israeli embassies and Jewish centers in Argentina were conducted by the Islamic Republic and Hezbollah. That was in the 90s. That was in the 90s. Was that an act of war? How about the terror proxies that the Islamic Republic has created to foster regional instability? What did you think that they were there for? What did you think Hezbollah was there for? Hamas, Houthis, the militia groups in Iraq and Syria. Did you think that they were there to instigate a system of public schooling, education, to feed the poor, house the unhoused? What did you think that they were there for? Is that an act of war? Was October 7th an act of war? Are the rockets that Hezbollah fires into northern Israel on a near daily basis an act of war? And so when these senior IRGC commanders meet up with Hezbollah in an IRGC military base, okay, not an Iranian embassy, and Israel strikes, your response is to say that that is an act of war. If you had listened to us for the past 2 years, much less the past 45 years, you'd know that Iranians don't want war with Israel. We want peace with Israel. Iranian people inside of Iran have come out and said this over and over and over again. It's you that wants war with Israel. It's your hatred for Israel and your hatred for Jews that's pulling us into a war that we didn't ask for. Have we not suffered enough for the past 45 years that we now have to be used as pawns for your fantasies about war with Israel? Leave us alone. We don't want that. So if you want to support the Islamic Republic in putting Iranians' lives at risk and everyone's lives at risk, they just killed a 10-year-old Bedouin boy for this. Is that what you wanted? Then just come out and say that with your whole chest. Say you support the Islamic Republic in their continued aggressions that put everybody's lives at risk, but don't say Iran. For 2 years, we asked you to come out and say free Iran, and now you want to speak up to put our lives at risk and say go to war, Iran. You are no friend to the Iranian people for that.
Well, it's incredibly powerful, and she's not just a pretty face, although she is a pretty face. That's an important message. And for 2 years, as she said, the people of Iran have been marching in the streets and protesting over a young woman who was murdered by the police state because a little bit of her hair was showing underneath a scarf. Biden was dragged kicking and screaming to issue a statement. He didn't say anything personally about it. Meanwhile, AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, you know, the girl power left-wing Marxist congresswomen for the Democrats, they didn't say anything. They're not supporting women who are being slaughtered in the streets in an Islamic republic because, you know, it's not politically cool, man. It's politically cool to be like Barack Obama and sort of have a third-way triangulation over Iran. Because for some insane, and I do mean insane reason, going all the way back to the Obama administration, the Obama, Biden, Jake Sullivan, Susan Rice regime that's been running foreign policy and national security for the Democrats had decided that the way to peace and balance in the Middle East is to elevate, platform, and empower Iran. Iran. And now we're seeing how it plays out. We're seeing it manifest right now perfectly in this latest attack. It's funny. And by the way, I do want to give a shout out to this woman. I just commented on how beautiful she was, but I should at the very least give you her name. She is a social media influencer. She's on X as well as Instagram. Alicia Laban, it looks like, and she is out of London. She is an attorney, and she is a daughter of Iran, as she calls herself. And it is an important distinction between Iran and the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic, whose main claim to fame after they took power in the 70s was to invade our embassy and take our hostages. It's pretty amazing to see these apologists for Iran running in front of a cable news or broadcast news camera over the weekend saying, well, Israel did launch an attack on Iran's embassy. Oh, yeah, because Iran really holds embassies sacred, don't they? And by the way, that's a lie. It wasn't an embassy in Damascus. It was like blocks away from the actual embassy. Israel went after the mastermind of the October 7th attacks, who was given safe harbor. He is an Iranian general, and he was given safe harbor in this military annex in Damascus. That's who they went after. It's like when we went after Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, because he was the mastermind of 9/11. Did you hear anybody saying, I can't believe they're invading a sovereign nation, Pakistan, and going after this military annex of an embassy of Al-Qaeda's operations in Pakistan? No. We found where Osama bin Laden was. We didn't ask anyone's permission. We went in there and we got rid of him. Why can't Israel do the same thing? You know why. You know why. John Kirby, spokesperson for the White House, was on Fox News Sunday yesterday, and I asked about the fact that we have financed this. Did you know that 1 month ago, the Biden administration released sanctioned money to Iran? They didn't have to. They didn't have to. We had money that was being held because there are international and American sanctions against the Iranian regime. The Biden administration waived that sanction unilaterally without any vote in Congress, and they gave $10 million to Iran 1 month ago. Asked about all the money that Biden has ensured the mullahs get as they finance terror attacks across the Middle East, John Kirby had this to say.
Is it not fair to say, though, that there have been moves by this administration that have opened up cash and other opportunities for them, which we know are fungible in ways that are not helping the Iranian people, but are benefiting the elites and people there who chant death to America and death to Israel?
You and I have had this fungibility argument before. I obviously take a different issue, or take an issue with that characterization. The sanctions relief that has come about, or it's not even sanctions relief, but the additional funds that have been made available to Iran due to a sanctions relief program that the Trump administration put in place can only be used for humanitarian goods. It doesn't go to the regime. And the idea that the regime was somehow felt like they were freed up to support these proxies because of that, it just doesn't comport with the facts. They have been supporting these proxies for many, many years.
And it comports with their language, though, saying we will use this money in the way that we want to use it.
They can't.
Well, I hate to break it to John Kirby. He's the spokesperson for the National Security Council in the White House, which is a pretty important job, but it's not as important of a job as Secretary of State. This is Anthony Blinken. I think he outranks John Kirby, and I don't think these two have been talking about this because somebody missed a memo on the fungibility of the money given to Iran. Here was Anthony Blinken just a couple of months ago when asked the very same question.
What do you say about the argument that money is fungible? So Iran may have known this money is coming and used other funds to help fund this attack that happened.
Iran has unfortunately always used and focused its funds on supporting terrorism, on supporting groups like Hamas. And it's done that when there have been sanctions. It's done that when there haven't been sanctions. And it's always prioritized that. And again, I come back to the proposition that these funds have always been, under the law, available to Iran to use for humanitarian purposes.
There you go. But it's not fungible. It's not fungible, says John Kirby. Anthony Blinken asked about the fungibility. He says, yeah, they always use their money for terrorist attacks. So by all means, let's make sure that we bend over backwards and twist ourselves into pretzels to give a waiver to sanctions that's holding that money from the terrorist regime. Let's just lift it so that that terrorist regime can get the money for humanitarian purposes. Yeah, dudes, since you have halted all domestic oil production and exploration in the United States of America, you have single-handedly driven international oil prices through the roof. Not only has that funded Vladimir Putin's war machine in Ukraine, but you've also given a huge benefit and boon to the Iranian mullahs as they sell their oil to our other enemy, China, who you also want to play footsie with. So they don't need your humanitarian aid, you idiots. All they got to do is keep selling oil that you have made so expensive through your feckless climate policies. Am I the only one who sees this? John Kennedy, senator from Louisiana, also appeared with Shannon Bream this Fox News Sunday and was asked about where the Senate stands on this.
Yes. And in the past 60 days, we have seen President Biden go wobbly in his support of Israel. And today, the White House has already leaked to the press early this morning that they're not going to participate in an Israeli response to what Iran just did. Let me say it again. More sheep is not going to solve the wolf problem. My advice to the president today, for what it's worth, Mr. President, don't. Stop it. Support Israel. With respect, go to Amazon and buy a spine online. Peace through weakness never works, not with these hard men. Yeah.
That might need to be my new ringtone. John Kennedy, go to Amazon and buy a spine online. Leave it to Joe Biden, though, to actually, he promised to bring us all together. He promised to reach across the aisle and get Republicans and Democrats to actually work toward a common cause. And inadvertently, I think he may have done it because agreeing with John Kennedy is none other than John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania.
Joining us now to discuss, Democratic Senator John Fetterman from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Senator, what is your reaction to Iran's attack on Israel, and how worried are you that this is the beginning of an open war between the two countries?
Well, a couple of things, actually. I think it really demonstrates how it's astonishing that we are not standing firmly with Israel, and there should never be any kinds of conditions on all that. When a nation can launch hundreds of drones towards Israel, and I'm not going to be talking about conditions ever. And second, I think that also was Iran had to have some fireworks after Israel smoked that Iranian general. And I'm here for that. And I think it's just a matter of theater, part of it as well, too. And finally, it demonstrates how unstable things are and why we need to lean in and stand with Israel.
I don't know who I like better right now, Kennedy, who is maybe my favorite, or Fetterman. Israel smoked that Iranian general, and I'm here for that. He actually literally gave it the thumbs up. Isn't it amazing how John Fetterman was like this woke Bernie Sanders leftist? He gets into the Senate, suffers from depression, goes to the hospital, gets treatments, comes out, and now he's suddenly red-pilled conservative. I mean, I don't really believe he's a conservative, but he's pretty reasonable on certain issues all of a sudden. And I would only say to Democrat John Fetterman that he should probably take that message that he just delivered to Jake Tapper and what few American people still watch CNN, and he should probably talk to his leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, because last month, actually just a couple weeks ago, we saw him saying this.
But in order to achieve a two-state solution, the reality is that things must change. Right now, there are four major obstacles standing in the way of two states. And until they are removed from the equation, there will never be peace in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. The four major obstacles are Hamas and the Palestinians who support and tolerate their evil ways, radical right-wing Israelis in government and society, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
That was Chuck Schumer speaking on behalf of the Democrats. He's the highest ranking Democrat other than the president. And he is telling the world that Benjamin Netanyahu and so-called right-wing Israelis are pretty much just as bad as Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. I mean, the conditions and the throwing Israel under the bus, Senator Fetterman, it's happening in your own house there. Talk to your guy about it. And how is this all manifesting here in the United States with the radical left marching on the streets of American cities, tearing down posters of hostages that are still being held? Could we pause for a minute and remind everyone that American and Israeli hostages are still being held over there while Biden plays footsies with the terrorists? While that's going on, and while these marches are going on our college campuses and our streets, we caught whiff from the Free Press, who captured this video of a training session for woke American leftists, all of them white, wearing masks, by the way. I love that touch. Learning how to properly chant death to Israel and death to America.
So I'm going to teach you a chant in Persian that you can use if you ever encounter those Zionist freaks, whether they be Iranian or whatever, all right? Now, I don't drink margaritas, but we all know what a margarita is. We all know what a bar is. So you're going to say, Marg Bar. Marg Bar. Marg Bar Israel. 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 Thank you. Oh, so it has two meanings depending on.
I'm going to let you see the rest of it, but understand that they were all chanting that with such fervor and excitement and gusto, and then they said, "What does that mean?" Which is, by the way, perfect for these left-wing extremist radical protesters who show up wherever their Facebook group told them to go show up, because they don't have jobs. You pay their salaries through benefits, and maybe they're public employee union members. So, yeah, I'll chant whatever you tell me to chant. I don't care. What does it mean again? Now he's going to explain what it means.
It can mean death to or down with. So can we get a Marg Bar America? We can get a Marg Bar America. Yes, we can. Marg Bar America. Marg Bar America. Marg Bar America. Marg Bar America. Thank you.
Yeah, good job, the Free Press, getting that to us. That's Joe Biden's America. That's the healing. Remember when Charlottesville was the reason that Joe Biden had to run for president because he didn't recognize who we were anymore? This is who we are now under Joe Biden and under his weakness. And then there's the economy. You know, financial experts thought that we were going to get some interest rate reductions. They were hoping for 6 this year. All we were waiting for was that February inflation number. As soon as it came in and things had stabilized, here come the interest rates. Well, you know how the story ends. Not only did the February inflation numbers go up, so did March. And we didn't get either of those two interest rate deductions. Maybe we'll get 3 if we're lucky. I'm sure they're timing it out for right before the election. This is a problem that is not going away. We are $34 trillion in debt. We keep printing money to pay for things that we don't need with money that we don't have. That's why prices for everyday items go up, because that's the formula for inflation. Now, you can either bury your head in the sand about it, or you can actually do something about it. If you're worried about your retirement and the value of the dollars in your retirement accounts, diversify a portion of your savings into gold with Birch Gold Group. Gold is your hedge against inflation, and Birch Gold makes it easy for you to own. They'll help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, and you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Birch Gold Group has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Triple B is what was in my mind. And thousands of satisfied customers. You can trust Birch Gold too. Text Larry to 989898 right now. Get your free info kit on gold. Then talk to a precious metal specialist on how to protect your savings from persistent inflation with gold. Text Larry to 989898 right now. It's there, isn't it? Is it there? I can't see it because I'm looking at you. Is it there? It's there. Text Larry to 989898 right now. We have been observing, marveling at, appreciating and really enjoying the transformation of Oprah's doctor, Dr. Phil, right before our eyes. You'll remember we commented on his appearance on The View. We'll put the link right up here in the corner if you didn't see that segment. It's amazing. There's Dr. Phil on The View, basically schooling all the women on The View about the realities of the border issues right now, because he actually went and looked at it and explained to those women exactly the truth about what's happening on the border. Also, you'll remember the exchange that he just recently had with those pro-Hamas students from University of Michigan. And now there's more Dr. Phil. On his show late last week, he had a DEI expert on, diversity, equity, and inclusion, who was there to clear the air. She was there to explain exactly how critically important DEI is. And, well, Dr. Phil was ready for her.
Some demographics come to the table and have to overcome racism, unconscious bias, misogyny. And so how do we help level the playing field for everyone?
Okay, so that means you're trying to create equality of outcome.
Mm-hmm.
How do you create equality of outcome when people aren't the same? You're right. Some people are shorter. Some people are taller looking over that fence. They can't both play in the NBA. You can't create equality of outcome. What gives a DEI program the right to come in and try and alter the nature of things to create equality of outcome? That's been tried. That didn't work. That was called Marxism.
Oh, man. I don't think he and Oprah are speaking anymore, right? They can't still be friends. They're certainly not, but Oprah doesn't produce this, does she? There's no possible way. What has happened? Is he watching Jordan Peterson in his spare time? That's fantastic. And by the way, I love that this DEI person, he says, so you're really trying to ensure equality of outcome. And she's like, that's right. It's like, so do you not know anything about the history of the Soviet Union? Or communist China, or Pol Pot in Cambodia and Vietnam and North Korea and Venezuela. And do I need to keep going? Yep, we're here for the equality of outcome. But it gets even better. He did an entire segment on the speech police, on wrongthink, on Orwell in 1984, all wrapped up into one charming idea. Canceled words and phrases. And my favorite part of this entire segment that we're about to watch, and sit back, we're going to enjoy this, it's a few minutes long, is the reaction from his audience. Because listen, you and I, we live in this world all the time. We consume this kind of alternative media that we're able to stream for you via Town Hall and on Rumble and other various outlets that we have, so that we see exactly what's going on in our kids' schools. We know what's going on at our workplace with the quarterly DEI training and the list of things that we're allowed and not allowed to say. We've seen what the military has instituted, with some branches of the military rethinking whether soldiers should say yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, things like that, right? But most of these people, most normies in this country, most people who are just worried about making sure that their grill is functioning and that they can make it to their kids' little league soccer game or what have you, they're not as plugged into this stuff as we are. Rush used to call them low information voters. And it wasn't meant to insult them. Actually, I'm jealous of low information voters. I would like to not be plugged into this stuff all the time. And I'd probably have a happier life. I want you to watch the reaction of the people as they're hearing about these banned words and phrases for the first time ever. Take a look.
I put together a list of things that just drive me crazy. Like one up here. You can't say mom and dad anymore because some people might come from a family where there are two dads or two moms. And they said, you can't, because we don't want a letter coming from school that says, dear mom and dad. Did you ever get a letter that said, dear mom and dad? Of course not. We don't have enough problems. We've got to think about that. You can no longer say America is the land of opportunity because some people don't feel like it's the land of opportunity. Is it just me? In fact, you can't even say America. I'm not kidding. You can't say America because that implies that America is better than the other countries in the Americas. You can't say tone deaf. You can't say blackout or brainstorm. This is considered racist. We're going to have a brainstorming session that would offend people that have brain injuries. You can't say peanut gallery. Are we offending peanuts? When you're talking about a car, you can't say, well, it's got a blind spot, because that offends people that are unsighted.
All right. I'm going to let more go on. I just wanted to interject here just because I'm enjoying the delivery so much. It's like somebody gave Senator Kennedy his own show, right? Except a little, frankly, a little more local yokel than Kennedy. And I did my favorite thing. I don't know who his producers are, but they're doing a great job over at Dr. Phil. I actually know people who have been invited on the show from the right. We're never invited on any of these shows, man. And Dr. Phil truly does have a production team that is interested in what we have to say. And I'm considering it. Anyway, whoever's producing this, the visual is so important, right? Because they understand not just television and streaming content, but social media as well. What's going to grab your eye? And the image of Dr. Phil walking in front of this giant screen, like it's in AT&T Stadium down there with this is Jerry Jones's big Jerry vision down there for the Cowboys. And he looks this big, and Dr. Phil's a big dude. He looks this big, and he's dwarfed by these giant phrases that have been canceled. And right there, grandfather, mom, and dad. I think it's hilarious. And he's doing almost a stand-up routine with these things because he gets that it has to be mocked with righteous outrage, but mocked nonetheless. That's the lesson of my friend Andrew Breitbart. Righteous indignation. You better be indignant. It's righteous indignation, and they deserve to be laughed at. All right, back to Dr. Phil.
I'm pretty sure they know they're blind because they can't see. I'm not judging them. They just are. We now have to look at people that have said, well, since we can't say that, we'll tell you what you can say. And so they've come up with inclusive alternatives like unschooled. These are stupid people. You can't say minorities anymore, so these are historically excluded. You can't say, let's brown bag it today. Like bring your lunch in a brown bag. You can't say that anymore. That's from the University of Washington. I kid you not, they have a list of things that you can't say. So what they say is lunch and learn. Unintentionally at leisure. You ain't got a job. Does anybody want to guess what people who menstruate are? The National Institute of Health, instead of calling someone a woman, they're birthing people. Now I can just imagine calling Robin a birthing person. The Lancet says bodies with vaginas instead of women. Doesn't that seem dehumanizing? Calling somebody a body with a vagina?
It does, and it's great. Again, I told you the reaction from the audience is the most important part here, because I'm pretty sure, I know I've seen all of those, haven't you? We've known about this. It's been coming. We're the only ones who have been talking about it, and that's why the people are surprised. That's how this happens. Do you want more Dr. Phil? All right, we got one more Dr. Phil. Let's do one more Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil also recently, as I mentioned, went down to the border, and he saw exactly how bad things were, and he directed a little ire toward our vice president. She's a birthing person, by the way, a person who menstruates. She's our border czar, too, and Dr. Phil had a message for her.
Since President Biden took office, more than 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed Texas southern border in just 3 years. And what about our Vice President, Kamala Harris? Did you know she is actually this country's immigration czar? Well, guess how many times she's been to the border? Once.
Yeah. And of course, when she went there, it was a photo op and she didn't do anything about it. Here's the only problem with Dr. Phil. He's getting so close and he's getting it. He's understanding it. But there's one piece of the equation that he still needs to put together. He's got to find that last piece of the puzzle so it all is clear to him, because he's acting like Kamala Harris is incompetent. He's acting like the Biden administration and Mayorkas. They don't know how to fix the border. They don't know what they're doing, or they have good intentions, but it's just not working out well, right? No. The last thing that Dr. Phil has to get, and maybe he understands it, but he haven't reached the point where he can articulate it or not. The real truth of the matter is everything that's happening on the border right now is exactly what Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas and Joe Biden, if he's even aware, it's exactly what they want. This is by design. We know that now. There's no doubt about it. This is exactly what they've planned. And when Dr. Phil gets to that point, boy, now we're talking. But good on you, Dr. Phil. Welcome aboard. You're real close. Let's go. Also, we've mentioned over the last few weeks how we're seeing Bill Maher appear to take a bit of a turn. And I've been very cautious about this. All right. Listen, Bill Maher is an avowed leftist. He's also an atheist and he's immoral. All right. He honestly, he wants to go to the Playboy Mansion and screw hot women. That's the beginning, middle, and end of his worldview. He doesn't think there's a God. He thinks he's going to die and nothing happens afterwards. So why not live it up, right? But he's also an observer of our culture, and he sees exactly what's been going on in this country, and he's been able to call the left out from a position of relative, what's the word? From a platform that the left will actually accidentally listen to him. All right, how's that? So he had a couple of Brits on the show, including Piers Morgan, to talk about the latest battle, the political battle in this country over abortion. And I've got a couple of comments about this. I'm going to interrupt it halfway through and make a comment before Bill Maher gets his say. But I want you to watch it because I think it's incredibly telling and important.
Europe, for example, by comparison, the 60 countries of Europe. Actually, there are many countries in Europe where it's completely illegal to have an abortion. Poland, Malta, places like Andorra, so, and if you look at Germany and France and countries like that, it can be 10, 12 weeks is the term limit that you're allowed to have an abortion legally. So America is not such an outlier. If it does go to the States, I think a lot of Americans on the left do think that this is somehow a really unique American problem or an issue that only pertains to them in terms of the legality of abortions. Actually, comparative to Europe, it's not massively dissimilar.
But the thing that's crazy is at a time when America is facing so many huge geopolitical threats, where there's a huge tech revolution going on, where the economy is faced with all kinds of challenges, the idea that you're fighting an election around this issue seems to be, just strange. Back to the 19th century.
Okay, real fast here. Let me just jump in here because it needs. And by the way, I think I called her a Brit by accident. She, from the accent, I believe, is Irish. Let's just be clear here. What Piers Morgan said is absolutely true. There are some countries in Western Europe that have pretty strict limitations. Like, 15 weeks would be way too radical for them. He mentioned Germany and in France. And did you know that in France, before you have an abortion, you have to have an ultrasound so you can see what exactly it is you're aborting? And it's funny when a woman sees that heartbeat and sees the movement and sees an arm or a leg, they have second thoughts. And I'm told from the left that they want abortion to be safe, legal, and rare. And if having an ultrasound before the procedure would make it rare, then why wouldn't they be on board with that? Weird, isn't it, that they're not? It's almost like they're lying about that whole safe, legal, and rare thing. But that fact, the fact that Western European nations actually have more restrictions than America does. America is alongside communist China and North Korea in allowing abortion without any explanation, on demand, right up until the moment of birth. We are right alongside, well, that was up until Roe v. Wade being overturned, and now some states are bringing limitations in there where they belong. But we were right alongside North Korea and China. Aren't we proud? The fact that Western European nations, as Piers Morgan just pointed out, are in fact, have more limitations and more restrictions. And the fact that this woman said it's outrageous that you're having this debate right now. Well, let me explain why we're having the debate right now. Because the Supreme Court in 1972 stopped the debate. If the Supreme Court with Roe v. Wade had not ground the entire national debate state by state that was occurring naturally through our Constitution and through the democratic process from occurring, then we probably would be right where France is right now, or Germany, or maybe we would have more restrictions like Poland. I don't know. We'll never know, because Roe v. Wade through the Supreme Court artificially stopped the discussion, stopped the debate for 50 years. Now we're picking up where we were back in 1972. So I understand why it might look weird to you, ma'am, but it's because we had this stupid, draconian, unconstitutional process injected into the entire thing. And one other thing, she just said it's outrageous with all of the with growing big tech in the economy. Like, oh gosh, what are you more concerned about, the killing of an unborn baby or big tech? Well, I mean, I'm concerned about big tech, but when push comes to shove, let's save the babies, ma'am. But she says it's outrageous that you're having an election centered around this issue. Just so you know, we are not having an election centered around this issue. The Democrats, Joe Biden, and the media and the cultural elites in the entertainment world, on late night talk shows, in the movies, in the music industry, they want this election to be about this. They are trying to inject it into every election that we have, whether it's for the House or for the Senate or for the presidency. We as a nation are not having an election centered on abortion, because guess what? I hate to break it to you, but whoever wins the presidential election, they literally cannot do anything about abortion on their own. Literally. This is going to be settled by the states, as Trump announced last week. It will be. You may like that, you may hate that, but that's the reality of it. And this is not an election centered around that issue. That said, what Bill Maher then moved on to in this abortion discussion is incredibly important and vital for you to hear. It might be hard to hear, actually, because it's very rare that you get a pro-abortion radical to say out loud exactly what Bill Maher says right now, but you've got to hear it.
Not if you believe it's murder. You know, that's why I don't understand the 15-week thing. Or the Trump's plan is, let's leave it to the states. You mean, so killing babies is okay in some states? Like, I can respect the absolutist position. I really can. I scold the left on when they say, oh, you know what? They just hate women. People who aren't pro-life, pro-choice. They don't hate women. They just made that up. They think it's murder. And it kind of is. I'm just okay with that. I am. I mean, there's 8 billion people in the world. I'm sorry, we won't miss you. That's my position on it. What?
That's quite harsh, Bill.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not
Is
sure
that not your position if you're pro-choice?
Isn't that mainly because you don't like children? I mean,
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
no. I mean, but if you are, you said you're pro-choice. That's your position too.
It's such an incredibly unintentionally powerful moment, actually, because he stunned these pro-choice panelists and his entire audience into silence when they were faced with the reality of their position. I mean, Maher says, yeah, y'all say it's anti-woman. It's not anti-woman. They actually think it's a baby, these pro-life people. So they think that abortion is murder, and they're kind of right. The only difference is, yes, it's murder. I'm just okay with it, Bill Maher says. We have overpopulation anyway. We don't need all these babies. Yes, it's murder, but we're okay with legalizing this kind of murder. And he said, and if you're pro-choice, that's your position. Here is a guy who is actually celebrating, promoting abortion, mostly for his own selfish reasons, because let's face it, I'm pretty sure Bill Maher has gotten a woman or two into trouble in the past. And so he uses it to, hold on to his money, I guess. By the way, Bill Maher is famous for a very funny and insightful joke about prostitution. He once said, men don't pay prostitutes to have sex with them. Men can always find a woman to have sex with them. Men pay prostitutes to have sex with them and then leave. That's Bill Maher's worldview. And as crass and as amoral, I think I called him immoral before. Amoral is probably more accurate. As crass and as amoral as Bill Maher can be, he actually has some important insights on our culture and most importantly on the left. Because look at Piers Morgan's face when he's confronted with the reality that that's his position. If you are pro-choice, then you're reduced to, whether you articulate it or not, this position that the killing of a human life is just fine in your books. That's it. All right, now we move on. Oh, by the way, this was articulated in a pretty mainstream and popular way by none other than Bernie Sanders when he was running for president.
Good evening. Human population growth has more than doubled in the past 50 years. The planet cannot sustain this growth. I realize this is a poisonous topic for politicians, but it's crucial to face. Empowering women and educating everyone on the need to curb population growth seems a reasonable campaign to enact. Would you be courageous enough to discuss this issue and make it a key feature of a plan to address climate catastrophe?
Well, Martha, the answer is yes. And the answer has everything to do with the fact that women in the United States of America, by the way, have a right to control their own bodies and make reproductive decisions. And the Mexico City Agreement, which denies American aid to those organizations around the world that allow women to have abortions or even get involved in birth control, to me is totally absurd. So I think, especially in poor countries around the world, where women do not necessarily want to have large numbers of babies, and where they can have the opportunity through birth control to control the number of kids they have, something I very, very strongly support.
To save the planet. Kill more babies to save the planet. The population bomb has already been debunked. There isn't an overpopulation crisis. Ask China. Remember China instituted their one-child policy in the early 80s because they were going to be overpopulated? Ask them how things are going right now, as they've now lifted that, seeing the cultural and economic catastrophe and demographic catastrophe that they're about to have in front of them. And by the way, someone should let all of the righteous, liberal, hippie women like Martha in the audience there know that a one-child policy like China instituted, which I'm sure for the sake of the planet, she would love to institute here. What it resulted in was the murder of unborn girl babies, and in some cases, the outright murder of girls after they were born, because in China, they value the male infants so much more. Yeah, that's girl power, all right. But there's Bernie Sanders, and my favorite part of that clip has always been when he says, especially in poor countries. Now, let's break that. He wants to promote abortion, especially in poor countries. Now, first, you need to show me a poor country that has a majority white population. You won't be able to. Okay? Not poor by most world standards. So when a lily white Vermont millionaire Marxist stands up on stage next to a lily white descendant of the Vanderbilts who is gay and doesn't have to worry about abortion for himself, when he stands up on stage internationally on CNN and says, yeah, we got to make sure we get a lot of abortions, especially in poor countries, he's talking about we got way too many of those Black, brown, and Asian people. And we got to make sure that we empower those babies to be killed before they're even born. That's what he's saying. And how is that different? How is that different than what Bill Maher just said last night? And for that matter, what Joe Biden, devout Catholic Joe Biden, stands for? And the answer is it's not. It's not different at all. It's the old Spider-Man meme, right? They're the same. Can you insert that here, Kevin? I should have had it ready. You know, when Spider-Man's looking at Spider-Man, it's a great meme. They're the same. All right. More from Bill Maher, though. He has this podcast where he sits down and he smokes joints with people and they just, shoot the shit. Well, he had Katie Couric, and I think is that a blunt or is that a cigar? I think it's a cigar. because he was trying to keep it classy for Katie Couric. She went to Yale after all, although she was a cheerleader at Yale. So anyway, they were talking about Donald Trump and how he's still very popular despite all of the trials and convictions and all of this stuff. And I want you to listen to this exchange where, first of all, Katie Couric is like, her hair's on fire. She's so upset that people are actually supporting Donald Trump. But Bill Maher sort of cuts through the crap and says, no, this is the problem with the media. You guys don't get it. You're out of touch with actual voters. Here, watch.
Okay, remember the town hall he had on CNN about 6 months ago, and the audience loved it. The audience loved it. I mean, you can hate
It was stacked with Trump supporters.
Well, they said Republicans and independents. That's what they said.
Can I jump in here real fast? Because this whole Katie Couric, it was stuffed with Trump supporters. And she's upset about that. These made-for-television events. It was a CNN town hall in Iowa prior to the Republican caucus. So why would you have Democrats in the audience? It's the Republican caucus. The whole point of the town hall was for there to be a presidential candidate talking to Republicans in Iowa who are about to caucus. And I hate to break it to you, Katie, but that means the majority of them are going to be Trump supporters because Iowa voted for Donald Trump the last two elections by like 60% over the Democrat. So if the audience by design is only supposed to be Republicans who are voting in the Republican caucus, who the hell do you think is going to be there? But this is a great insight into how Katie Couric and other people in the media and NBC News, who she used to work for, and CBS News, really approach these issues and approach these events. Because I'm sure with the network she used to work at, they would stock the audience full of Trump haters, even though it's supposed to be a reflection of the town hall. Which, by the way, is a good time to remind you, become a VIP member of Town Hall Media. Use the code Larry and get 50% off. That's right. That's right. It was a town hall, and I'm going to sell you on Town Hall VIP membership. Our websites, of course, are townhall.com, redstate.com, bjmedia.com, twitchy.com, hotair.com, and bearingarms.com. That's the entire Town Hall Media universe. And this show, of course, is a product of that great Town Hall Media universe. Use code Larry right there to get 50% off so you can get exclusive content as well as an ad-free experience on our sites. Shameless plug. Okay, back to Bill Maher explaining why the audience at the CNN town hall of Republican voters seemed to like Donald Trump, much to Katie Couric's chagrin.
Okay, maybe it was. How'd they get in? If they did, that's on CNN.
I agree. I think
Then
it
you
is
gotta
on
get it-
CNN, and the vetting process
Well,
was
then you got to get a better audience person.
obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the person who handed the gun to Alec Baldwin.
yeah,
You know, got to get good people in all these positions.
I agree.
Okay, so if that was about whatever, even if it was, here's what happened. Here's what people saw in America. They saw Trump killing it with the crowd. Then you come to a panel of 6 people who all just do nothing but dump on him and call him a liar. And America goes, oh, didn't you just see that we like him? And
He's
now
not a stand-up comedian.
what?
He's killing it. He's not a stand-up comedian.
No, but popularity doesn't matter. The people loved him and what he was saying. And then you cut to a panel of 6 know-it-alls in Washington who just do nothing but talk about the negative. And like, I'm all in on the negative. No one's been harder on Trump than me, but I get it and I'm bored with it. And there's a different way to do this, I think, which
So
is
what is it?
not to defend Trump, but to defend the people who still vote for him, because what they see on the other side to them is even more dangerous because it's very closer to home. My kid is coming home from school and he thinks he's a racist. He's 5. What have you been telling him? You know, my son thinks maybe he's not a boy, and maybe that's true. That happens. But, you know, those kind of things are what they say. That's why I'm voting for Trump.
A backlash to the pendulum swinging so far to
Conservative
the
guy
left.
once said to me, what you don't get about Trump is we don't like him either. Now, that's not true for all people. There are people who just love his dirty draws, and they are dirty. But Lots of people, it's like that. We don't like him, but he's all that stands between us and madness. That's their view.
So
I would like that view presented.
Yeah, and he's right about that, by the way. If you ever watch cable news, and you don't have to, that's what we're here for. We find you the best clips and we'll play them for you. But if you ever do, one of the most frustrating things about watching these panel discussions that he's talking about is there is never, ever, ever, and I mean ever, just one person sitting on that panel representing you, representing the majority of American voters who were like, yeah, I get all that about Trump, but yeah, if he's the nominee, I'm going to vote for him. And here's why. You never hear that voice. And that's why on election night, they're all screaming at the sky and crying and renting their clothing. But my favorite part of this entire exchange is Katie Couric hears all of that and then decides it's her turn to talk. And she's going to say, well, let me really explain to you what all this support of Donald Trump is about. Understand something. She was a network news anchor at CBS News until just a few years ago. She was the host and anchor of the Today Show for years and years and years. This is a woman who always presented herself as the unbiased journalistic voice of America, who doesn't have you know that they're all left-wing liberal Democrats. And the moment they don't have their job anymore and they're able to speak their mind, just like Dan Rather, just like all of them, like Tom Brokaw even, well, they show themselves to be who they really are. So here's Katie Couric explaining to Bill Maher exactly what's behind the support for Donald Trump.
And I feel like, to your point, Bill, the socioeconomic disparities are a lot, and class resentment is a lot, and anti-intellectualism and elitism is what is driving many of these anti-establishment, which are Trump voters, or anti-establishment voters. So I think that is a huge problem that we have to address. I mean, globalization and, the transition from an industrial to a technological society. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been jealous of what someone else has, or resentful. It is such a corroding and bitter, almost bile feeling.
Right. I wonder what she's referring to, like when Deborah Norville took her job on the Today Show, when she was resentful of her for having that. Does anything scream intellectual elitist more than somebody sitting there saying, the reason why Trump has all this support is because really, and they hate us. The reason they hate us is because of their anti-intellectual, anti-elitism that is really fueling their resentment and jealousy toward us. That's exactly how you got Trump in the first place. Keep talking, honey. Keep talking. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow streaming live on Rumble like we do every day at noon. If you liked any of our segments today, please find them. We're going to post them a little later on Rumble, on YouTube, and wherever else we post. Oh, and all the town hall sites I just mentioned, where you're going to get 50% off if you use the code Larry for the VIP experience. We're going to be posting all the individual segments a little later. Like them, comment on them, share them around, because you're really helping our show grow in huge ways. I appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm Larry O'Connor. Call me Larry.